Welcome to the Tunabudget Podcast, your source for insights into financial wellness. Today, we're diving into personal debt crisis. At Tunabudget.com, home of the Tunabudget Worksheet Plan and candid conversation memos, we offer resources that simplify budget life planning. We encourage discussions about real-life challenges affecting our finances. Don't forget to submit your candid conversation memo at Tunabudget.com. Let's get started. Today, we're going to begin with what the crushing burden of heavy debt feels like, okay? So just relax, maybe close your eyes and imagine you're home from work on that first memorable Monday afternoon, okay? You bring home some bad news about your job. As you try to get some sleep, the first wave of the burden of crushing debt creeps up like a thief in the night. You feel like you've just been attacked and your heart starts to race a little bit. The thought crosses your mind that you may be in serious potential financial trouble in the next few months if you don't find that stellar new job like right now. The next morning you realize that those nice, reliable paychecks are no longer coming in, aside from some severance pay. After being laid off, you quickly learn that the job market is more stressed than you thought it was. Could it be possible that it would take many months to find a decent job or longer to find a really good job? You feel sick inside because your lifestyle has resulted in a heavy debt burden and your savings are lower than you'd hoped. Suddenly, in those first weeks since being laid off, you are feeling the prospects of no longer being able to make the payments on all your debts on time if something doesn't shake out quickly. Put in any amount of debt that you want right here. The rest of your budget is stressed too, as you use up your severance faster than you thought you would, or you thought it would last. As the first unemployed month goes by, you begin to realize the very place you're living in could be in trouble, but it is in jeopardy. Your severance somehow needs to make the next month's mortgage payment or rent, and your funds will be nearly depleted in another 30 days. You start to contemplate as to where and how you could possibly move. You just can't default, and what about your stellar credit? And what about the kids, their friends, the schools? You know, the credit risk Goliath at your door within 30 to 60 days? No, it's more than that now. It's in your heart and mind every minute of the day as your spouse is unable to handle the stress and anxiety his or herself. Another month goes by and there's nothing out there for you. As pressure builds in your private, quiet place, if you will, you cry in despair. It almost becomes anguish. You shout out, "How could I have been so foolish to get into such debt?" When you're around the children, you try to maintain your composure, but nerves are starting to come apart. You are aware of those other budgeted expenses that also need to be paid, not to mention the food, your child's class activities, or gas for the car and other things. Of course, the car breaks down and needs to be repaired too, right? You borrow the last of your credit card limits, wondering if you'll truly ever be able to repay them. And if you can't, if it is even morally right to be using more debt than you know you'll ever be able to be repaid. You've always wanted to deal in good faith, so there's that conflict too. Now in your third month without work, you know that your secured borrowings are at risk. Your extravagant lifestyle is at risk, along with the beautiful residence, and the top-of-the-line truck, and your spouse's pretty car. And yes, both vehicles need new tires that you hadn't planned for, like you should have. All of a sudden you can't sleep because you're having a hard time thinking how you're going to come up with the money and what to do next, right? You also have debt on your toys, too. Your unsecured credit card borrowings are an extra heavy burden because of the high interest rate and the fees that you'll never be able to repay over the next 20 years. You realize these unsecured creditors can sue and get a judgment against you, leading to garnishment of your bank accounts and place even a lien on your other assets. Default interest rates could be applied, making it more impossible to pay, and collection fees will be applied for good measure, right? How could this affect your job if you had one, and your job performance? Now you're reaching your fourth month. Like water in the desert, every dollar is precious. It has become like a scene out of the Twilight Zone. What happened? Why? How? What's next? Further deterioration could possibly lead to a bruised credit score profile and possibly bankruptcy to hold off foreclosure and repossession action. You wonder about whether and when you'll ever be able to borrow again, get a new mortgage or a car loan. What if you need to but can't sell your home fast enough to capture some of that equity to maybe even just pay off debt and still keep your good credit score? Borrowers can somehow sense distressed sellers and this is buyers, I should say, can somehow sense distressed sellers as they can tell your anguish is overwhelming and you look like you're crushed. The burden is too heavy. You are no longer sure that your spouse is really what your spouse is really thinking, and wonder, like, for example, how she's taking it. You even ask yourself if she'll continue to stand by you, even though you know your spouse has always been there at your side as an equal partner and works hard too. But both of you are now worried sick about the welfare of your children who are young and don't understand what's going on. No more going out on the town, the parties, the friends, vacations, the holidays. And what about back to school clothes? There's very little cash. No more borrowing availability on the credit cards, right? No more savings. Your card's on empty again and again. And so are you. Maybe you get some unemployment income that won't be enough for anything, right? Family contributed assistance is a blessing straight from heaven. The job prospects, at least up to now, are not good. You're willing to take any job at this point, one that'll even pay the core bills and living expenses. The burden has become overwhelming and crushing. And this is just at the end of the first 90 or so days. You have no real plan and there's no real peace. Okay, now wake up. Okay, it was just a nightmare. Okay? And so hopefully this candid conversation memo is not for you. Hopefully it'll never come about for you either. But you need to walk through the reality that, the fragility, how fragile everything is, okay? So just read this kind of stuff anyway, just to have it in the back of your mind and maybe start thinking like, maybe I need to put together my Tunabudget Worksheet Plan and check out all this debt and see what we've got at risk. How close 90 or so days can go by without a good job and what it could really mean for you. So I hope you'll pay a little attention to this and maybe put yourself in this story's shoes, if you would. I've actually been there a time or two in my 43 years history. So if it's you, I hear you loud and clear, okay? I'm particularly sensitive to those of you who carry the crushing burden of heavy debt. And maybe it didn't start out that way, but just because of the lower income, being laid off and what have you, it becomes heavy and crushing, okay? Especially if you're married and have a family like I do and I did. Nobody really talks about the crushing burden of heavy debt these days, all right? And too many people have actually experienced debt's overwhelming crushing power. And it's caused enormous problems. And precious things may have been lost, right? You may know this yourself. To those people, maybe most of them, they would avoid debt, if you would, or going there again at any cost, at any low interest rate, regardless, ever again. Because crushing is crushing, which means to press or to squeeze with a force that can basically destroy. You don't want to go there intentionally and being unwise by getting into heavy debt, or just find your debt load has become too heavy, like I said, because of a loss of income. If you know, if you know of the crushing burden of heavy debt, you'd never borrow another penny the rest of your life, right? It's that heavy. For those who don't understand what it is or how it feels, just picture yourself having to serve two masters, as they say. Debt payments to the creditor and the other feeding your family. Okay, you've got a choice. And you must learn to manage through both. And you can do that while using your Tunabudget Worksheet Plan. There are dire consequences on either side, right? The pressures can build to become overwhelming, yet you can't give up or give in. Everything can become at stake, and the pressures will intensify as life events unfold. How do you keep it all together? Only those that have been crushed by it will ever fully know the pressure. Nothing is worth getting in over your head, though. If you're experiencing it, you would give anything to get out of the bondage. That's what it is, bondage. It's the worst feeling ever, and I believe ever. You'd hate to be underneath it, and you can't get out, only until you pass through it. If you let it overcome you, it can be destructive. Or you could learn from it, get wise, regardless of what the world thinks of you. But sadly, you may be there now, or you could be there in the future. Again, what you thought started out to be a hefty but manageable debt load, suddenly you could find yourself in an overwhelming personal debt crisis. What was once steep but manageable debt is no longer the case. You can be crushed by what has become a heavy debt burden. However, there is a solution to any problem. I want you to remember that. And there are ways to guard against it in the first place. This short ad is sponsored by the Debt Crisis Problem Podcast. Attention listeners, please join us at Tunabudget.com to tune in to the Debt Crisis Problem Podcast, where in plain English, we discuss the 20 risks that could soon fuel a serious economic downturn. We explore critical risks that could not only trigger a downturn, but we offer practical insights for navigating financial uncertainty. Join us for thought-provoking discussions that encourage transparency and awareness. Subscribe now to stay informed and be ready for whatever comes next. Now, I want to go back in and talk a little bit about the dangers of debt, period, okay? Debt can be a tool, but debt is also slavery or being in bondage. It literally means that you are bound or subjected to being controlled by the payment of interest and principal payments to a creditor. Interest, the cost of borrowing money that is not yours, is a heavy ball and chain. It's danger that is always with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. It never sleeps. It doesn't even take a nap. And it does not care about you or any hardships you're experiencing. Are you one of these people who leverage their income to buy like more stuff and better stuff and bigger stuff by acquiring it all through debt, by making the minimum payments, of course, or one that earnestly seeks to repay debts as soon as possible? Maybe you are in between the two. Do you fall for the low interest rate offers with exciting advertising where people look so happy, their phony smiles as they get into debt or bondage? Well, what if your income decreases dramatically? What if unexpected expenses come? Realize that substantial future income will be paid as interest expense. For a mortgage, it can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars just in interest, monies that could have been spent on other important areas. Do you have savings for an emergency, like for new tires or a medical expense? How is your financial well-being in terms of having things in order like you want them to be, that you know they should be? Again, the dangers of debt are very real and personal. My advice would be to avoid or to fix your debt. For those of you who are not there yet, stay away from debt. If you have to take on debt, keep the word modest in mind when purchasing a home or maybe getting an education. For everything else, think cash. Everything else. Save it up, save money up, and avoid debt. Think low budget. Again, avoid debt. Go without. Again, avoid debt. Go less expensive. Again, avoid debt. Go cheap. Are you getting this? Again, avoid debt. Save up. Again, avoid debt. Go without. Finally, avoid debt. Debt should be only on a very modest basis for housing and possibly for education, usually based on one income, not two. Yes, this thinking does create a problem, right? If enough of you followed this guidance, prices would have to come down out there, but you don't and you won't. But if you do, you decide what modest means or what it might mean in the marketplace. One reliable measure for modest housing expense could be the average market rents. You would need a cushion in your ability to repay, so a modest payment allows for that. That's why it must be at a modest level. Life happens, Okay, incomes become reduced or lost altogether. People get sick or get injured or disabled. And heavy debt loads don't care if you are sick or injured and what have you. Again, interest never sleeps, as they say. You'll be glad to only have a modest debt level and payment and somehow be able to survive versus asking for help to make a large house payment from people who have maybe made more wise decisions themselves. If necessary, rent. Yeah, that's the alternative. That's what you are wondering. Yeah, if necessary, rent. Be extra careful in borrowing for housing, transportation, toys, vacations, easy credit card purchases, etc. Education debt should also be modest, if any borrowings at all. Work for an education while you're getting an education. It generally pays to get an education, training, certification, something, but you must be wise. Is now the right time to borrow? Ponder and consider your entire package of housing, transportation, education, along with possible future expenses. Really think about how you will repay each of these things, especially when or if you will be planning on sustaining a family and household. Maybe you can find a way to pay as you go when it comes to education or technical training or getting some kind of a certification, and not accumulate enormous education debts at this time. Go with your gut, though, and when you do not look back. But keep it all modest, okay? And you should be fine. If you're not modest now, consider fixing things by any means necessary, like downsizing. You use your Tunabudget Worksheet Plan to help you see what changes need to be made and how you can get there. I'm going to ask you now, how wise are you? And do you really realize yet that a Tunabudget Worksheet Plan will show you where you're at financially, help you understand why you are where you are, and let you clearly see and then develop a path to get where you want to go? Isn't it time to go about managing your finances more wisely? Or do you have to learn the hard way and possibly lose precious blessings in your life? What does it really mean to avoid debt or excessive debt? To live modestly, or to get out of debt and stay out, or to live within or hopefully below your means so you can have some savings, or to pay as you go? Are you really that willing to rush into debt and become a slave to a creditor for how many years? Why is it that you want to buy it now and pay for it later and not save now and just buy it a bit later? Is buying all that stuff on credit real prosperity? Or real wealth anyway? Wealth is built upon equity, not debt. Debt is just fake wealth. Just because your neighbor has all this and all that, if it's all on borrowed money, it's fake. Okay? It's not real wealth. The lender really owns that junk until he pays for it all to the last penny with interest that he will never get back. Until then, the creditor is his, or in your case, if it's you, your master, and he and you are in bondage to this lender. If you default, he takes the collateral away, and your reputation, your credit score is hit. Maybe it's about time about you and your neighbors stop this nonsense and be more discerning between wants versus needs. Being unwise will have consequences, especially in the near term. I'm going to ask you again, are you gullible? And did you get sucked in? Remember the ads out there of happy couples and the kids jumping into a new car, a new home, and the couple taking a sweetheart vacation to an exotic beach? All that was needed was for them to take out a new home equity line of credit, right? At an initial low teaser rate, of course. You could also use a line of credit to, not really pay off your other loans, but to consolidate them over a 20-year period so that you have a long repayment period, right? Debts that should have been paid off in, say, 30 days from a credit card, or 5 years for like an auto loan, or 10 years left on a student loan, you can now pay them off over the next 20 years because you just got a home equity credit line. Wow, isn't that exciting? Sign me up, Johnny. I can hardly wait to be in bondage for the next 20 years for an exotic vacation that we could have saved up for a year or so and paid cash for. Talk about being gullible and being a sucker. It crosses the line of in my opinion, is stupidity, especially if you don't have a real repayment plan and are just flying by the seat of your pants. But you just had to have it to impress the lady, right? Now you're in bondage, real bondage. And how can that be? And what went wrong? After all, the cute family in the ad, they look so happy, and they certainly didn't look like they were going to be crushed. If you can relate, how did you get lured in? Okay? How about starting to humble down, or maybe you're still prideful? Is there any good to come out of all of this? Yes, there is. You are really at a crossroad in life. I'm assuming you have debt here, right? This is the good side if you will let your debt crisis teach you instead of destroy you. You can let your pride take hold. Sorry, but it is pride because you can't see it. So just accept that that is what it is, and it will just ruin your life. Or you can do the opposite. For those that choose what I'll call the better path, think humility. In a heavy, debt-crushing burden environment, there is nothing that two humble spouses or a humble individual, as your case may be, that they cannot fix. Bank on it. It's true. There is also a solution for any debt crisis, any problem, any debt load, anything. Whatever humble yourself means to you, do it. Apologize. Go to bed. Get some rest. Wake up early and get working, doing something. Move your feet, smile, play with the kids. Just be nice to your spouse. Get over yourself. Tomorrow will be a better day because you took the right road to be humble and trusting of this process. So just bank on something good happening. You know what's being said here. It is a choice you get to make. Choosing wisely, humbly, is where power comes in. Nothing can stop two spouses on the same page, and the kids will love you for it, okay? My advice, put together your Tunabudget Worksheet Plan. To see the stark naked and exposed dire straits you're in, right? Complete the first draft of your Tunabudget Worksheet Plan ASAP. Let it sink in for a day or two, and then start talking it up. Go ahead and ask for feedback advice from those you love and trust. While you go through your own debt crisis, ask for assistance from your siblings and family to keep the lights on if you need to, or maybe gas in the car, or food on the table. That's what a strong family does. They have each other's back. If your extended family isn't strong, then reach out and do something about it. They have a natural duty to be there for you, and maybe it's long past time that you become close with your siblings once again, okay? Think about it. Solutions will come because you're on the right road, so stop worrying. If you have any contention in your heart with your siblings, know one thing. You are prideful, and you are in the wrong. Sorry, but it's true. Simply choose the other road, humility. Get on it and start walking and talking. Do it out of love. If you don't love them, you probably don't love yourself. Figure that one out, too. I mentioned maybe it's time to maybe start finding ways to love yourself more, right? And to figure that out. And maybe just stop doing those things that are bringing you unhappiness. And you know what I mean. Or start doing those things that will bring you real happiness. Just love yourself, and then you'll be able to better love them and get connected. This is your siblings we're talking about. Sometimes you just have to say those inexpensive few words like, I'm sorry, or I love you. If you can't do that, your middle name is prideful. I'm sorry. Shape up and ask for some help, for crying out loud. Just say those simple words. I'm sorry, or I love you. They're powerful, and they will change and bless more lives than yours. Do you get this? Okay, enough said. If your Tunabudget Worksheet Plan says you need help, then go ask for help. Okay, I have a number of candid questions for you. Have you or someone you know been crushed with the burden of overwhelming debt? How did you or they survive it? Which path did they take, humility or pride? How much of your asset base is being financed? Literally, how much? Is this wise? Are you a gullible sucker for debt? And how about this? How much risk is there of you suddenly becoming overwhelmed with a crushing debt burden crisis? If it's medium or high risk, what are you doing about it today to be prepared? Next, how can you see the benefit of preparing ahead of time your own Tuna Budget Worksheet Plan? Can you see that benefit? Do you understand how such a plan could be used to negotiate with creditors in troubled times? Next, if you know of someone who is struggling financially, what can you do to offer some relief of that heavy debt burden? Could you anonymously leave a porch full of fresh groceries or just a personal note of reassurance with your unemployed or sick neighbor or friend or family member? And what good do you think that will do? Do you think this person or family member would ever forget your generosity and loving attention? Thank you for joining us. Today we explored personal debt crisis, highlighting the importance of open conversation in financial wellness. We want to hear from you at Tunabudget.com. Submit your candid conversation memo and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe for future podcasts. Until next time, visit Tunabudget.com for your free Tuna Budget Worksheet Plan, the most powerful budget worksheet plan in the world. Yours. Thanks again.